Karen ripped my building permits from my hands and stomped them into the mud, screaming,
"This death trap will never be built. No kids will drown on my watch."
She's HOA president, clipboard in one hand, megaphone in the other, yelling at my contractors to stop digging. Bulldozer frozen in my driveway, papers scattered like confetti in the desert dirt. I'm Garrett, combat engineer, grieving widower. This therapeutic pool was Elena's dying wish before cancer took her. County inspectors approved every detail, 0 violations. But Karen lied.
"Improper design, too close to property lines, safety hazard."
She thought she could crush a broken military guy. She forgot one thing. Safety regulations go both ways. What if they weaponized child safety to destroy your healing? I turned their rules against them. What would you do? Drop your HOA nightmare stories below. Where are you watching from? Let me back up and tell you how this war started. I'm Garrett Steele, 52, retired Marine Corps combat engineer. 2 years ago, I watched my wife, Elena, lose her battle with cancer. Right before she died, she made me promise something that seemed impossible at the time. Build that pool, Garrett. You need it for your back, your nightmares. Promise me you'll heal. See, I came back from 3 tours with a shattered spine and PTSD that kept me awake most nights. The VA docs said swimming was my best shot at managing both the physical pain and the mental demons. Elena knew I'd never do it for myself, so she made it her dying wish. After the funeral, I moved to Willowbrook Estates outside Phoenix, bought a corner lot specifically for the pool installation, paid extra for the space and privacy. The house overlooked the community park, perfect for watching kids play while I did my therapy laps. I spent 8 months doing everything by the book. Soil tests, setback measurements, electrical permits, drainage studies. The county engineering department became my second home. Every form filed correctly, every regulation exceeded. The inspector called my plans textbook perfect. That's when I met Priscilla Thornfield. Picture the ultimate HOA president from hell. 58 years old, real estate agent by day, neighborhood dictator by night. Drives a white BMW with vanity plates reading HOA boss. Lives in the biggest house on Magnolia and Pine, the kind with fake columns and more square footage than a small school. Priscilla had run Willowbrook's HOA for 8 years straight. Nobody ran against her anymore. She'd crushed the last 3 challengers with violations and legal threats. Residents whispered that she measured grass with an actual ruler and drove patrol routes at night, hunting for infractions. The morning my contractors showed up, she appeared like a bad omen. I was standing in my backyard watching Frank Kowalski's crew unload the excavator. The smell of diesel fuel mixing with desert sage, that familiar construction energy I'd missed since leaving the Corps. County permits posted prominently on my fence, everything legal and approved. Then I heard the click of designer heels on gravel. "Mr. Steele!" Priscilla marched across my lawn like she owned it, clipboard in one hand, megaphone in the other. "We need to discuss your unauthorized construction project." "It's authorized," I said, pointing at the permits. "County approved everything last month." "The county doesn't understand our community standards." She pulled out her measuring tape like a weapon. "This pool violates multiple safety regulations. Children could be endangered." That's when she did something that changed everything. Priscilla ripped my building permits out of my hands and stomped them into the mud, screaming, "This death trap will never be built. No kids will drown on my watch." The workers stopped digging. Frank shut off his bulldozer. The whole neighborhood could hear her shouting through that damn megaphone about safety violations and property values and how military people don't understand suburban living. "Too close to property lines," she shrieked, waving her measuring tape. "Improper design, safety hazard." Every word was a lie. My setbacks exceeded code by 2 feet. The design was professionally engineered. County inspectors had signed off on every safety feature. But Priscilla smelled blood in the water, a grieving widower isolated in a new neighborhood trying to honor his dead wife's wish. Perfect target for a power-hungry bully who'd never been told no in her HOA kingdom. She thought I'd fold like the other residents, pay her fines, accept her authority, give up on Elena's promise. She forgot one critical detail about combat engineers. We don't just build things. We build things that last forever. And when someone tries to tear down what we've built, we get creative about construction methods. The paperwork scattered in the dirt like confetti. My contractors packing up their equipment. Priscilla's satisfied smirk as she walked back to her BMW, thinking she'd won another easy victory. That smirk was about to cost her everything she'd spent 8 years building. The next morning, Priscilla launched her first official attack. A certified letter appeared in my mailbox. Notice of covenant violation, unauthorized construction activity. She was demanding I cease all pool construction immediately and pay a $500 daily fine until the safety violations were corrected. I called my attorney Marcus Webb, a guy who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for making board presidents cry in depositions. The bitter taste of black coffee filled my mouth as I explained Priscilla's latest power play. Let me get this straight, Webb said. She's claiming your county-approved pool construction violates HOA safety rules? That's her story. Garrett, this woman just handed us a harassment lawsuit. HOAs can't override county safety approvals. That's established law. But Priscilla wasn't done. She called an emergency HOA meeting for Thursday night, packing the community center with her supporters. The room reeked of burnt coffee and nervous sweat as residents filled every folding chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. We have a dangerous situation developing, Priscilla announced from her podium, pointing dramatically at a poster-sized photo of my construction site. Mr. Steele is building an unauthorized swimming pool that threatens our children's safety. The crowd murmured. I stood up in the back, my Marine training keeping my voice steady. It's not unauthorized. Here are my county permits. I held up the replacement copies, clear plastic sleeves protecting them from any more trampling incidents. County permits don't supersede our community safety standards, Priscilla shot back. Our covenant clearly states that any water feature must be approved by the HOA board. That's when I remembered something from my weeks of research. See, combat engineers don't just build things. We study the terrain first. I'd spent 3 months reading every HOA document, every covenant, every procedural requirement. Most residents never bothered, which is exactly how tyrants like Priscilla stayed in power. Actually, Priscilla, I submitted my pool plans to the HOA 8 months ago. Request number 2024-156. You never responded within the required 30-day period. The room went dead silent, which means automatic approval under Section 4.2 of our governing documents. Priscilla's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. That request was incomplete. We needed additional safety documentation. No additional documentation was requested. I have the certified mail receipts proving delivery and your failure to respond. The crowd started shifting in their seats. Residents began whispering to each other. Mrs. Dorothy Clearwater, the retired teacher who lived 2 streets over, actually smiled at me. For the first time in years, someone had challenged the queen bee in public and had the paperwork to back it up. Priscilla grabbed her gavel like a warhammer. This meeting is adjourned. The board will review Mr. Steele's claims and respond appropriately. But the damage was done. The smell of fear was being replaced by something else. Hope. Over the next week, Dorothy knocked on my door with homemade apple pie and valuable intelligence. That woman's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, she whispered, the sweet scent of cinnamon filling the air between us. Most folks are too scared to fight back. She's got violations she holds over everyone's heads. Meanwhile, my security cameras caught something fascinating. HOA maintenance crews accidentally damaging property belonging to residents who'd crossed Priscilla. Sprinkler lines cut. Landscaping chemicals spilled on prize rose bushes. Mysterious potholes appearing overnight. I'd learned from my military legal training that most HOA enforcement actions require majority board votes and documented evidence. Selective enforcement based on personal grudges violates fair housing laws in most states. Priscilla was breaking more rules than the residents she was harassing. I also discovered that Priscilla's own property had some interesting features. A deck addition that didn't match building permits, a fence measuring 6 feet 2 inches when HOA rules capped them at 6 feet, paint color that definitely wasn't on the approved list. Webb's strategy was simple. Demand Priscilla follow her own procedures or face a federal civil rights lawsuit for discriminatory enforcement. We documented everything. The automatic approval of my pool plans, her procedural violations, her pattern of retaliation. But here's what really got under her skin. I wasn't backing down. Most residents folded when she brought out the legal threats. They paid up, tore down their improvements, learned to keep quiet. The military guy with the dead wife and county permits wasn't playing by those rules. Friday afternoon brought another certified letter. Final notice: cease construction or face legal action. Now she was threatening to place a lien on my property and sue me for endangering community welfare. I sat on my back patio reading her threat, watching sunset paint the desert mountains purple and gold. The smell of grilling burgers drifted from next door, where my neighbor hosted a family barbecue. Normal suburban life continuing while Priscilla escalated her private war. That's when I realized she wasn't going to stop. This wasn't about safety or property values. This was about power, pure and simple. She'd built her kingdom on intimidation and selective enforcement, and I represented the first real threat to her reign in years. Time to stop playing defense. Priscilla's next move came Monday morning, and it was brilliant in its cruelty. 3 county inspector vehicles pulled into my driveway at 7 a.m., official badges gleaming in the desert sun. Not HOA maintenance, actual government officials. Mr. Steele, we've received multiple anonymous complaints about safety violations at your construction site. We need to conduct an immediate inspection. My stomach dropped. I watched the lead inspector, a tired-looking woman named Martinez, examine my permits with the kind of thoroughness that meant someone had convinced her this was serious. These complaints are very detailed, she said, flipping through a thick folder. Improper electrical placement, unstable soil conditions, inadequate drainage that could flood neighboring properties. Now, the complaints were bullshit, but they were professionally written bullshit. Someone had done their homework using the exact technical language that would trigger a full reinvestigation. As the inspectors spread across my yard, measuring and photographing everything, I realized Priscilla had just played a move I hadn't seen coming. She wasn't just harassing me through the HOA anymore. She'd weaponized the county government itself. The inspection lasted 4 hours. The smell of fresh coffee from my kit Smith mixed with desert heat as I watched them check every measurement twice. Finally, Martinez approached with her clipboard. Mr. Steele, I'm not finding any of the violations described in these complaints. Your installation exceeds code requirements by significant margins. So I can continue construction? Legally, yes, but... She hesitated, looking uncomfortable. These complaints came with photographs, detailed measurements, even soil samples allegedly taken from your property. Someone spent serious money on professional documentation. Documentation of violations that don't exist? That's the thing. The photos showed genuine safety problems, just not on your property. She showed me several pictures of electrical work and foundation issues. This looks like it might be from different construction sites entirely. My blood ran cold. During my intelligence training, we'd learned about disinformation campaigns, mixing real evidence with false accusations to muddy the waters. Someone had documented actual safety violations at other properties and submitted them as evidence against my project. Who submitted these complaints? Anonymous tip line, but the paperwork shows legal letterhead from Thornfield Realty. Bingo. After the inspectors left, I called Webb with this new information. From my years dealing with bureaucratic warfare in the military, I knew that filing false reports with government agencies crossed into criminal territory, not just civil harassment anymore. She's escalated to document fraud, Webb said, excitement clear in his voice. If we can prove she knowingly submitted false evidence to county officials, we're looking at potential criminal charges. But Priscilla wasn't finished. That evening, she appeared at my door again, this time with 2 other board members flanking her like bodyguards. The sweet scent of evening jasmine couldn't mask the tension radiating from their little delegation. Garrett, we need to talk about the inspection today. What about it? I passed with flying colors. That's not the point. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. The point is that you're bringing unwanted government attention to our community. Property values suffer when county inspectors start crawling all over the neighborhood. A board member, Janet Mills, a nervous woman who always looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Priscilla stepped forward, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. You abandon the pool project, and we'll make sure no more anonymous complaints find their way to the county. We'll even waive the fines we've already assessed. And if I refuse? Well, it's interesting what concerned citizens notice when they really start paying attention to a property. Landscaping violations, paint color infractions, mailbox placement issues. Her eyes glittered with malice. Anonymous complaints can be very persistent. That's when Janet Mills made the mistake that changed everything. We could also mention your military disability status in the complaints, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. PTSD, anger management issues, Sometimes county inspectors get concerned about unstable individuals with construction permits. The desert evening went dead silent. Even Priscilla looked shocked at Janet's stupidity. They'd just threatened to use my war injuries and mental health treatment against me in official government reports. That wasn't just harassment anymore. That was discrimination based on disability status, a federal crime with serious penalties. "Ladies," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm the way they'd taught us for prisoner interrogations, "I think this conversation is over." After they left, I sat on my patio watching the sun disappear behind purple mountains. The distant sound of children playing in the park mixed with the evening calls of desert birds. Normal life continuing while these people plotted to destroy me using my own trauma as a weapon. That's when I realized something important. Priscilla hadn't just picked a fight with a grieving widower. She'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent 20 years learning how to turn enemy tactics against themselves. Time to stop playing by their rules entirely. The next morning brought Priscilla's nuclear option. I woke to find 3 news vans parked outside and a reporter ambushing me at my front door. The acrid smell of camera equipment mixed with desert morning air as Channel 12's investigative team set up their shot. "Mr. Steele, how do you respond to allegations that you threatened HOA board members with violence?" My blood went cold. "What allegations?" The reporter held up a police report. "According to this filing, you made threatening statements during a recent board meeting, mentioning your military training and anger management issues." I scanned the document while cameras rolled. Priscilla had filed an actual police report claiming I'd threatened board members, using Janet Mills's stupid disability comments from our porch conversation as evidence of my unstable mental state. She'd flipped the script. Instead of being the victim of disability discrimination, I was now the dangerous veteran who couldn't control his PTSD. "The pool construction has been indefinitely suspended pending investigation," the reporter continued. "Sources say you've been harassing elderly board members and using your military background to intimidate community volunteers." Every neighbor watching the morning news would see this story. Every potential employer who Googled my name would find articles about the unstable veteran making terrorist threats. Priscilla hadn't just attacked my pool project, she'd carpet-bombed my entire future. I called Webb from inside while reporters camped on my lawn like vultures. Through my Kit Smith window, I watched neighbors gathered in small groups, some pointing at my house, others shaking their heads in disgust. "This is genius-level character assassination," Webb admitted. "She's used your PTSD treatment records and military service, things that should be protected, as weapons against you. Can we fight this?" "Eventually, but the damage is immediate and the correction takes months. Classic disinformation warfare." While we talked, Dorothy appeared at my back fence, moving carefully to avoid the media circus. I met her in my backyard, where my empty pool excavation sat like an open wound under the morning sun. "Brought you something important," she whispered, handing me a flash drive. "Security footage from the community center." "From when?" "The night Priscilla claims you threatened the board. My grandson works IT for the rec center. He pulled the entire meeting recording before they could delete it." I plugged the drive into my laptop. The footage was crystal clear. Me calmly presenting my permits, Priscilla screaming about safety violations, Janet Mills making her disability discrimination comments. No threats from me, just documentation of their illegal behavior. "But here's the really interesting part," Dorothy continued. "Keep watching." After the official meeting ended, the footage showed Priscilla and Janet staying behind, rehearsing their story. I watched them practice describing my threatening behavior and coordinate their statements for the police report. "They planned this," I breathed. "Premeditated fraud." Gets better. My grandson found email records on the community server. Priscilla's been coordinating with 3 other HOA presidents in Phoenix, sharing strategies for dealing with problem residents. Dorothy's eyes glittered with righteous anger. "They call it the nuclear option, filing false police reports to destroy people's reputations when standard harassment doesn't work." My hands shook as I processed this. During counterintelligence training, we'd learned about organized criminal networks. This wasn't one power-hungry HOA president. This was a coordinated conspiracy involving multiple communities and systematic civil rights violations. That afternoon brought the knockout punch. A Child Protective Services investigator appeared at my door, explaining that anonymous reports had been filed questioning my fitness to have my teenage daughter visit during summer breaks. "Mr. Steele, we've received concerning information about your mental state and potential for violence. Given the police reports and media coverage, we need to conduct a home safety evaluation. They were trying to take Sophia away from me. Elena's daughter, the last connection to my dead wife, the reason I was fighting for this pool in the first place. The CPS investigator, a kind woman named Rodriguez who clearly hated this assignment, spent an hour examining my home, interviewing me about my treatment history and documenting the media circus outside. "Mr. Steele, I want you to know that these complaints appear coordinated and potentially fraudulent," she said quietly as she prepared to leave. "Someone really wants to hurt you. Be very careful." After she left, I sat in my Kit Smith staring at the empty pool excavation through my window. The hole that should have been Elena's healing gift had become the center of a war designed to destroy everything I had left. Priscilla hadn't just attacked my construction project. She'd weaponized the entire system: media, police, child services, building department, turning every institution that should protect citizens into weapons against me. That evening, reviewing the evidence Dorothy had provided, I realized something that changed everything. In my years handling asymmetric warfare, I'd learned that enemies who overextend themselves create opportunities for devastating counterattacks. Priscilla had just made her fatal mistake. She'd created so much documentation of her criminal conspiracy that she'd built her own prosecution case. Time to turn her nuclear option into her funeral pyre. That night, sitting in my Kit Smith surrounded by legal documents and Dorothy's intelligence files, I made a discovery that changed everything. While researching property records for Webb's lawsuit, I'd been digging deep into the original subdivision plat for Willowbrook Estates. The musty smell of century-old survey maps filled my nostrils as I spread them across Elena's old dining table, the same table where she'd planned our dream pool, sketching ideas on napkins during her final months. Most people never look past basic deed information, but combat engineers are trained to study terrain in detail. That obsession with understanding every inch of ground had kept my Marines alive overseas. Now it might save Elena's legacy. The 1987 survey maps told a fascinating story. My corner lot wasn't just larger than the others, it was legally different. The original developer had marked it as sitting on a seasonal waterway requiring environmental protection. A creek had flowed through this area for over a century before being diverted during construction. But here's what made my hands tremble as I traced the survey lines with Elena's favorite red pen. Underground, that creek was still there. Tuesday morning, I called Geological Survey Company despite the media circus still camping on my lawn. Pete Williams, the owner, agreed to come out with his ground-penetrating radar equipment. "Most folks don't realize underground water sources have their own legal protections," Pete explained, his boots crunching across the dried desert soil of my backyard. "Arizona water law is complicated, but if you've got natural spring or seasonal creek under your property, you've got riparian rights." "What kind of rights?" "Right to manage that water source for environmental purposes. State can't deny permits for legitimate conservation projects, and neither can HOAs. His equipment beeped steadily as it traced the underground flow. Hell, you could dig channels, build retention systems, create water barriers for erosion control. The word hit me like a physical blow. Water barriers, defensive water features. How much water are we talking about? Enough to fill a decent-sized pond year-round. Enough to create substantial water management features if you wanted to get creative about it. That evening, Webb and I met at his office, the familiar smell of leather-bound law books mixing with desert air flowing through open windows. He spread out environmental statutes and water rights cases across his conference table. "Garrett, this is like finding buried treasure," Webb said, his voice rising with excitement. "Riparian rights in Arizona predate any HOA covenant or municipal regulation. The state is required to protect natural water sources for environmental conservation." "Meaning Priscilla can't touch it?" "Meaning you can build whatever water management system you want, call it environmental restoration, and nobody, not the HOA, not the county, not the damn media, can legally interfere." I stared at the survey maps, my engineer's mind already seeing possibilities that would have made Elena laugh with delight. She'd always loved my crazy construction ideas. The bigger and more ambitious, the better. What about structures to manage water flow, channels, retention barriers, access control for sensitive ecosystems? Webb's grin could have powered the city grid. Not only legal, the state offers tax credits for innovative water conservation projects, plus expedited permitting. Submit Monday, approved Friday. No public comment, no community input, no appeals for aesthetic complaints. I drove home through the purple desert twilight, past the media vans and judgmental neighbors with my pulse racing. Priscilla had spent months destroying me using bureaucracy and public pressure, turning every system against me like weapons. But she'd made one fatal error. In her obsession with controlling my simple therapeutic pool, she'd never researched the deeper legal landscape of my property. Elena had chosen this lot because she loved the space and privacy. What she hadn't known was that she'd picked the one piece of ground in the entire subdivision that came with bulletproof legal armor. Time to build something that would honor her memory and end Priscilla's reign forever. The next morning, I spread Elena's old garden sketches across my Kit Smith table alongside geological surveys and something most people would never think to research: medieval fortress engineering manuals. See, during my deployments, I'd studied historical defensive positions during downtime. Ancient engineers understood something modern builders forgot. The most effective barriers weren't walls, but water. Moats didn't just keep enemies out, they made every approach visible and controllable. The physics hadn't changed in 800 years. Operation Moat, I whispered, using the same planning discipline that had kept my Marines alive overseas. The project would unfold in 3 phases, each disguised as environmental conservation. To anyone watching, and Priscilla was definitely watching, it would look like a grieving widower channeling his pain into restoration work. Phase 1. Historical creek restoration. I'd excavate the original waterway following the underground spring's natural flow, 8 feet wide, 4 feet deep, lined with native stone. The dimensions weren't arbitrary. Medieval engineers had calculated that 8-foot water barriers stopped cavalry charges, while 4-foot depth prevented easy crossing on foot. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with desert morning air as I called Pete Williams for detailed site analysis. His ground-penetrating radar revealed even better news. Natural spring pressure would maintain water flow year-round without artificial pumps. "You know what's interesting?" Pete said, studying his readings. "This underground system has enough pressure to fill your channel fast if someone tried to drain it. Natural refill rate would defeat any sabotage attempts." Perfect. Self-defending fortifications. Phase 2. Sustainable ecosystem development. Solar-powered circulation to prevent stagnation, native plants for natural filtration, fish habitat for ecological balance. The system would be genuinely beneficial for local wildlife, giving my defensive position both environmental legitimacy and community support. Dr. Sarah Martinez from Arizona State arrived that afternoon with 2 graduate students, their sampling equipment crunching across the gravel where my pool should have been. The irony hit me hard. Elena's healing space had become the foundation for something completely different. "Mr. Steele, this could revolutionize suburban water conservation," Dr. Martinez said after examining the spring system. "Would you accept academic oversight? I'd like to apply for EPA grant funding to document your methods." EPA grants. Academic oversight. Priscilla's dangerous extremist narrative was about to meet nationally recognized environmental research. Phase 3 required the most delicate engineering: educational access infrastructure. A wildlife observation bridge with community education platform that happened to be retractable using simple counterweight mechanics. When raised, it would cut off all foot access to my property. When lowered, it would provide controlled community access for environmental tours. Frank Kowalski returned that evening, his truck's diesel engine rumbling as he pulled into my driveway past the lingering media vans. We sat on my back patio reviewing blueprints while desert bats hunted overhead, their chittering calls mixing with the distant hum of Priscilla's BMW making another surveillance patrol. 30 years in construction, and I've never seen anything like what she did to you, Frank said, his calloused fingers tracing the excavation plans. This is brilliant, legitimate environmental work that happens to create perfect property security. The bridge mechanism is based on medieval castle design, simple physics, impossible to sabotage. She won't be able to touch you, legally, physically, or bureaucratically. Frank's grin was pure satisfaction. Sometimes you gotta fight bullies with their own weapons. The permits would be submitted Monday morning, not to building inspection where Priscilla had contacts, but directly to environmental services where her real estate connections meant nothing. Riparian restoration projects bypassed standard review processes, meaning no public comment period and no appeals for aesthetic objections. Dorothy appeared at my fence as sunset painted the desert mountains purple, moving with practiced stealth to avoid Priscilla's evening patrol route, She handed me another intelligence envelope through the chain link. "She's been calling every county office trying to find out what you're planning," Dorothy whispered. "Left 16 voicemails with building inspection yesterday. They're starting to ignore her calls." The envelope contained printouts of Priscilla's increasingly desperate emails to various departments. She'd contacted everyone from fire services to animal control, fishing for advance warning about my suspicious construction activities. She knows something's coming but can't figure out what, I realized. Better yet, that security footage I found is spreading through neighborhood social media. People are seeing how she rehearsed her false police report. 3 more families filed state complaints against her this week. That night, I stood in Elena's memorial garden, the space that would soon become part of the restored ecosystem, listening to underground water flowing beneath the desert soil. The night air carried the sweet scent of her jasmine plants, still blooming despite everything Priscilla had put us through. Elena would have loved this plan. The environmental restoration, the medieval engineering, the poetic justice of turning bureaucratic weapons against their wielder. She'd always said the best victories weren't about destroying enemies, but building something so beautiful it made their ugliness obvious to everyone. Monday. I'd submit permits that would give me legal authority to construct the most elegant revenge project in suburban history. Priscilla wanted to weaponize government systems against grieving veterans. She was about to discover what happened when those systems protected something genuinely worth defending. Monday morning, I walked into the County Environmental Services office carrying 3 boxes of documentation and the quiet confidence of someone who'd outflanked every enemy position. The smell of government coffee and copy machine toner filled the air as I submitted permits that would end Priscilla's war. "Riparian restoration project," I told Carmen, the friendly receptionist. "Complete ecological assessment with academic oversight." Wow, this is thorough. Most people submit 2 pages and hope for the best. I don't leave things to chance. While Carmen processed my permits, my phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "I know what you're really building. The neighborhood won't stand for this." Too late, Karen. The permits were already in the system. By Wednesday, Frank's crew was back with county environmental monitors and Dr. Martinez's academic team documenting every shovel of dirt. The rumble of diesel engines mixed with excited graduate student chatter as they collected baseline ecosystem data. That's when Priscilla made her most desperate move yet. She arrived with her entire board, a hired attorney, and what looked like a professional photographer. The attorney, a sweating man in an expensive suit, approached while his photographer documented everything for what I assumed would be another lawsuit. "Mr. Steele, I represent Willowbrook Estates, HOA. We have serious concerns about your unauthorized excavation activities." I handed him my environmental permits. "Fully authorized riparian restoration with state oversight." His confident expression crumbled as he scanned the documents. Behind him, Priscilla paced like a caged animal, her usual composed mask slipping with each passing second. "These appear legitimate," the attorney admitted, "but surely community aesthetic standards." "Environmental projects are exempt from HOA review under Arizona Revised Statute 33-1818, I interrupted. During my permit research, I'd memorized every relevant law. Knowledge of legal terrain had kept me alive in war zones. Same principle applied here. That's when Priscilla snapped. "This is revenge construction," she screamed, loud enough to make the graduate students drop their water testing equipment. "He's building a goddamn fortress!" "Doctor." Martinez looked up from her clipboard, professional composure intact. "Ma'am, we're documenting the restoration of native fish habitat to a century-old waterway. It's quite remarkable from a conservation standpoint." "I don't care what you call it." Priscilla's voice cracked like breaking glass. "He's building a moat, a medieval moat." Even her own attorney stepped back, phone already out to distance himself from this meltdown. The photographer kept shooting, but now he was documenting his client's public breakdown rather than my supposed violations. "Mrs. Thornfield," the attorney said desperately, "perhaps we should—" "No, I know what this is." Priscilla pointed at me with trembling fingers, her perfectly styled hair beginning to frizz in the desert heat. "You think you can fortress yourself against proper authority? You think your PTSD and your dead wife give you the right to destroy our community?" The construction site went dead silent. Even the desert birds stopped singing. She'd just made 3 fatal mistakes on camera, admitted she knew about the defensive nature of my project, used my disability against me, and invoked my dead wife as a weapon. Every word was being recorded by her own photographer. Frank shut off his excavator and pulled out his phone, adding to the documentation. Dr. Martinez was also recording, protecting her academic research from whatever lawsuit was coming. "Ma'am," Dr. Martinez said with ice-cold professorial authority, "you just made discriminatory statements about a disabled veteran on multiple recording devices. I suggest you consult legal counsel immediately." Priscilla's face went from red to purple to an alarming shade of white as she realized what she'd done. Her attorney was already walking toward his car, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling his malpractice insurance carrier. "This isn't over," Priscilla hissed, but the fight had gone out of her voice. She knew she'd just committed career suicide on camera. After they left, the work continued in an atmosphere of vindicated justice. The graduate students were practically vibrating with excitement about documenting environmental restoration while watching HOA tyranny implode in real time. That evening brought the most satisfying news yet. Dorothy appeared at my fence with intelligence that changed everything. 3 more board members submitted resignations today, she whispered, handing me printed emails. Janet Mills, the treasurer, and the secretary all quit rather than face the legal liability of continuing to work with Priscilla. The emails were brutal. Each resignation cited concerns about criminal liability and association with discriminatory harassment campaigns. The HOA was collapsing from within. "Better yet," Dorothy continued, "that photographer, he wasn't working for Priscilla. Channel 12 hired him to document her behavior after getting tips about her harassment campaign." The media trap had been reversed. Instead of documenting my supposed violations, they'd captured Priscilla's discriminatory meltdown and admission that she knew my project's defensive purpose all along. As desert stars appeared overhead, I walked around my nearly completed water restoration project. The sound of spring water flowing through hand-laid stone channels, mixed with cricket songs, and the distant hum of Priscilla's BMW, making another futile patrol of the neighborhood she was rapidly losing control of. Tomorrow would bring the final phase, installing the bridge mechanism that would complete both the environmental project and my defensive position. Priscilla's 8-year reign was ending not with legal battles or community votes, but with her own self-destruction captured on professional video. Thursday morning brought Priscilla's final, most desperate gambit. I woke to find my water restoration project drained. Every drop of carefully channeled spring water gone, leaving behind muddy stone channels and confused fish flopping in shallow puddles. The acrid smell of diesel fuel mixed with desert morning air told me exactly what had happened. Frank arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the sabotage, and started cursing in 3 languages. Someone used a pump truck during the night. Professional job. They knew exactly where to access the system. Any idea who? Garrett, there's only one company in Phoenix that rents industrial pumps after midnight without paperwork. He pulled out his phone. And I know the owner owes Priscilla's real estate firm some favors. Direct sabotage of an EPA-monitored environmental project. Priscilla had just escalated from harassment to federal crime. Dr. Martinez arrived with her graduate students to find them frantically documenting the ecological disaster. The sight of native fish dying in mud puddles while their restored habitat lay empty sparked genuine academic outrage. "This is environmental vandalism," Dr. Martinez said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "We're documenting the first successful urban riparian restoration in this region, and someone deliberately destroyed months of work. Can the ecosystem be restored? If we act fast. But whoever did this just committed a federal crime under the Clean Water Act." While her team worked to save the fish, I called Pete Williams about emergency refill procedures. His ground-penetrating equipment had revealed something Priscilla hadn't considered. The underground spring system had natural pressure that would refill the channels within hours if left undisturbed. "Here's what's interesting," Pete said as his equipment detected renewed water flow. "Your system has enough pressure to refill faster than industrial pumps can drain it. Try this again, and they'd need multiple trucks working continuously. Natural defensive engineering. The medieval castle builders would have been proud, but Priscilla wasn't done. That afternoon brought her nuclear option, a restraining order claiming I was constructing dangerous flood control devices that threatened neighboring properties during monsoon season. The court papers were professionally prepared and included expert testimony from a hydraulic engineer who'd supposedly examined my project. Every technical detail was wrong, but the legal language was sophisticated enough to fool a judge who'd never seen the actual site. Webb met me at his office that evening, the familiar smell of law books and coffee filling the room as we reviewed Priscilla's latest attack. "She's hired serious legal talent," he admitted. "This restraining order is designed to halt construction until a full environmental impact study can be completed." "How long would that take?" 6 months minimum, maybe a year with appeals. "And meanwhile, my project sits half-finished while she continues her harassment campaign. That's the strategy. Death by bureaucratic delay." But here's what Priscilla hadn't counted on. Her sabotage attack had been captured by security cameras from 3 different angles. Not just mine, Dorothy had convinced 2 neighbors to install systems after the HOA maintenance accidents escalated. "We have her on video coordinating the pump truck operation," Webb continued, spreading out time-stamped photographs. "Phone calls at 2 a.m., directing the crew where to position their equipment, even supervising the drainage process from her BMW. That's conspiracy to commit environmental vandalism. Federal charges with serious prison time. But here's the beautiful part. She documented her own crime. And he showed me the evidence that would end everything. Priscilla's own cell phone photos of the drained restoration project, taken at 4 a.m. and immediately uploaded to social media with captions celebrating the end of the extremist Veterans Fortress project. She'd been so desperate for validation from her online supporters that she'd created a permanent record of her federal crime, complete with timestamps and GPS coordinates proving she was at the scene during the sabotage. Friday morning brought the final escalation. Priscilla appeared at my property line with a bullhorn, 3 remaining board members, and what looked like a hired crowd of protesters carrying signs reading, "Stop Veteran Terrorism" and "Protect Our Children." The irony was perfect. While she screamed about my environmental project being a terrorist threat, spring water was already refilling my channels, and the restored ecosystem was healing itself faster than her sabotage could damage it. "Residents of Willowbrook," she shouted through the bullhorn, her voice echoing off house walls. "This man is building illegal fortifications. He's turning our peaceful community into a war zone." But something had changed in the neighborhood dynamics. Instead of supportive crowds, Priscilla's demonstration drew counter-protesters, residents with their own signs. "Support environmental education. Stop HOA harassment. Veterans deserve respect." Dorothy appeared with a megaphone of her own. "Priscilla Thornfield has been harassing residents for 8 years. She files false police reports. She discriminates against disabled veterans. She sabotages legitimate environmental projects." The battle lines were drawn across my front yard, Priscilla's dwindling supporters on one side, a growing coalition of fed-up residents on the other, with my restored waterway flowing peacefully between them like a moat around a medieval castle. That's when the news vans arrived, followed closely by county sheriff's deputies responding to noise complaints from both sides. "Ma'am," the lead deputy said to Priscilla, "we've received reports about environmental vandalism at this location. Would you be willing to answer some questions?" Her face went white as she realized the trap was closing. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of desert clarity that makes everything seem possible. I stood on my back patio at sunrise, watching spring water flow through completed stone channels, while early morning light painted the mountains gold. Today was the grand opening celebration for my urban riparian conservation demonstration project. By 9 a.m., over 200 people had gathered in my backyard and the adjacent community park. Dr. Martinez had invited colleagues from 3 universities, county environmental officials had come to tour the restoration, and local families brought children eager to see the fish habitat that had become neighborhood legend. Channel 12 was there with a full news crew, but now they were covering environmental innovation rather than HOA drama. The Arizona Republic had sent their science reporter. Even a blogger from National Geographic was documenting what she called guerrilla conservation in suburban America. The centerpiece of the celebration was the bridge dedication ceremony. Frank's crew had installed the final mechanical components Friday night, a beautiful wooden platform spanning my water feature, supported by medieval-style counterweight engineering that any castle builder would recognize. "Ladies and gentlemen, Doctor," Martinez announced from the small podium we'd set up near the bridge controls, "what you're seeing here represents a revolutionary approach to suburban water conservation." That's when Priscilla made her grand entrance. She stormed across my front lawn in her bathrobe and slippers, cell phone pressed to her ear, screaming at someone about emergency injunctions and stopping this illegal gathering. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her usual composed authority had completely evaporated. "This is a public safety emergency!" she shrieked at the news cameras pushing through startled families with children. "This man has built an illegal fortress. He's endangering our community with flood hazards and terrorist infrastructure." County Sheriff's Deputy Martinez, no relation to Dr. Martinez, stepped forward with his body camera already recording. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. There are children present." "I don't care about the children." "I'm sorry," Priscilla screamed. "This is about property values and community standards." The crowd went silent. Even she seemed to realize what she'd just said on camera. Dr. Martinez calmly continued her presentation. "As I was saying, this restoration project demonstrates how individual property owners can create significant environmental benefits while enhancing community education opportunities." "It's a moat!" Priscilla shrieked, pointing dramatically at my water feature. "He built a medieval moat to keep out the HOA. This is revenge construction designed to undermine legitimate community authority." That's when I decided to end this once and for all. "You know what, Priscilla? You're absolutely right." I walked to the bridge control mechanism while 200 people and multiple news cameras watched in fascination. This is a moat, a fully legal, environmentally beneficial, county-approved moat that happens to provide excellent property security. I placed my hand on the medieval-style lever that controlled the counterweight system. And thanks to Arizona riparian rights law, you can never touch it, regulate it, or interfere with it in any way. "That's illegal!" she screamed. "Actually," Webb said, stepping forward with a thick legal folder, "it's completely legal. Here's the EPA Environmental Excellence Award nomination. Here's the county's official recognition as a model conservation project. And here's the federal investigation report into your harassment campaign and environmental sabotage activities." Priscilla's face went through several color changes as Webb continued. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're being served with papers for a federal civil rights lawsuit. You're also being notified that the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into your multi-jurisdictional harassment conspiracy and environmental vandalism activities." "This is harassment. This is—" "Ma'am," Deputy Martinez interrupted, "you're under arrest for criminal trespass, disturbing the peace, and destruction of environmental property under federal oversight." The crowd watched in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked around Priscilla's wrists. Her bathrobe had come untied during her rampage, leaving her looking exactly like what she was, a broken woman whose petty tyranny had finally collapsed under its own corruption. "Residents of Willowbrook," she screamed as Deputy Martinez led her toward his patrol car. "Don't let him win. He's destroying our community." But the community had already spoken. As applause broke out across my backyard, I realized that Dorothy's quiet revolution had succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. "Now," I said to the crowd, placing my hand on the bridge lever, "let me demonstrate how medieval engineering protects modern environmental projects." I pulled the lever. The counterweight system engaged with satisfying mechanical precision, and the beautiful wooden bridge rose smoothly into position, spanning the flowing water between my property and the community space. When lowered, it provides educational access for environmental tours. When raised, it ensures the restored ecosystem remains protected from interference. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Children pointed excitedly at the fish swimming in crystal-clear spring water. University professors took notes on innovative conservation methods. News cameras captured the perfect image, a disabled veteran honoring his dead wife's memory while creating something beautiful for his entire community. As Priscilla's muffled screams faded from inside the patrol car, I realized Elena would have loved this moment. Not the revenge, she'd never enjoyed anyone's suffering, but the beauty, the innovation, the way individual healing had become community benefit. Sometimes the best victories aren't about defeating enemies, they're about building something so obviously good that the enemies defeat themselves. 6 months later, I stood on my bridge platform watching the sunrise paint my water garden in gold and crimson. The spring flow had strengthened during monsoon season, creating a robust ecosystem that attracted wildlife photographers from across Arizona. What started as Elena's simple healing wish had become something neither of us could have imagined. The immediate aftermath had been swift and decisive. Priscilla pled guilty to federal environmental vandalism charges and received 2 years probation plus $50,000 in restitution for ecosystem damage. Her real estate license was permanently revoked and she'd moved to a small apartment in Tucson, ironically in a complex without an HOA. The multi-jurisdictional harassment conspiracy investigation led to criminal charges against two other HOA presidents in Phoenix and Mesa. Dorothy's intelligence network had uncovered a systematic operation targeting vulnerable residents across multiple communities. The case became a model for federal prosecution of HOA abuse under civil rights statutes. Willowbrook Estates elected an entirely new board with Dorothy as president. Their first act was rewriting the governing documents to prevent future abuse, including term limits, transparency requirements, and strict penalties for discriminatory enforcement. The community that had once been known for the most restrictive HOA in the county now hosted monthly workshops on sustainable landscaping and resident rights. My property became a certified wildlife habitat site and educational demonstration project. The University of Arizona's Environmental Engineering program sends students here every semester to study urban water conservation methods. The bridge mechanism has been replicated at 3 other locations, proving that medieval engineering principles work perfectly in modern conservation applications. The Elena Steele Environmental Education Fund grew from initial documentary licensing fees and speaking engagement income into a $200,000 endowment. We've awarded scholarships to 12 students studying environmental engineering, water conservation, and disability-accessible landscape design. This year's recipient is Dorothy's granddaughter, who's researching legal protections for sustainable urban development. The personal healing surprised me most. Swimming laps in my therapeutic pool, yes, I eventually built Elena's original dream alongside the Moat, helped more than years of VA counseling. But the real therapy came from watching children learn about desert ecosystems during weekend educational tours, seeing their faces light up when native fish swam up to investigate their fingers in the water. Sophia spent the entire next summer with me, serving as a volunteer tour guide and helping maintain the fish habitat as part of her environmental science coursework. She named all the fish and created identification cards for visiting school groups. Elena would have been so proud of the young woman she's becoming. The property values Priscilla claimed to protect, they increased 22% in the first year after the restoration project completion. 3 neighboring houses have installed similar water conservation features, and Willowbrook Estates is now marketed as an eco-friendly community with innovative environmental leadership. National Geographic did feature the project in their Suburban Conservation Special, calling it a perfect example of how individual environmental action creates community-wide benefits. The segment included footage of Priscilla's arrest, with the narrator noting that sometimes the greatest threat to community welfare comes from those claiming to protect it. I still get emails from HOA harassment victims across the country, asking for advice on fighting back against petty tyrants and discriminatory enforcement. My standard response includes 3 key lessons: document everything, research your legal rights thoroughly, and remember that bullies usually defeat themselves if you give them enough rope. Webb's law firm now specializes in HOA abuse cases, using our successful strategy as a template for protecting residents' rights. He's won 17 similar cases in 2 years, establishing legal precedents that make it much harder for boards to weaponize bureaucracy against vulnerable homeowners. Every evening, I sit on Elena's memorial bench beside the flowing water, listening to desert birds and children's laughter from the community park. The sweet scent of her night-blooming jasmine mixes with the sound of spring water over stone, creating the peaceful healing space she always envisioned. Sometimes Dorothy joins me with iced tea and neighborhood gossip. Sometimes Sophia calls from college to check on her fish. Sometimes it's just me in the desert sunset, grateful for the reminder that the best revenge really is living well.
I keep coming back to that moment when Priscilla showed up at Garrett's door trying to make a deal. You know, the Hope Concerned Neighbor Act, offering him the alternative pool location. That was made his therapy basically impossible. She actually thought his ticket, thought the grieving military guy would just fall, move his dad's white final wish to some corner of the yard where it wouldn't bother anyone. What she didn't count on was him spending 3 months reading HOA document. Every covenant, every procedure, every loophole. Most people don't do that. Most people just assume the boss know what they are talking about. but combat engineers. They studied terrain, and Garrett found something in that terrain that Priscilla never even knew existed. That underground spring, the reference rise from the 1800s. By the time she figured out what he was really building, it was too late. The permits were already approved. The EPA was involved, and her safety concern didn't mean much when the state of Arizona said otherwise. Have you ever had someone underestimate you like that? Someone thought they have you figured out, but missed something important. Share this with anyone dealing with HOA drama. Hit subscribe for more stories like this. Sometimes the quietest ones are the ones you should worry about.